How you going, everybody? Welcome to the NFL Brekkie Show in our new, I guess it's newish, midweek window, Wednesday morning, Australia, New Zealand, Tuesday evening here in the States alongside Laurie, Horesh. I'm Phil Murphy. Laz, we have finally our first full week of the NFL season in the books, 16 games down, 256 to go.
And a little familiar tone from off 2023, Phil. We had a little bit of dip in scoring in last season's edition of the NFL. We saw defenses bite back for the first time in what felt like about a decade since we saw them buck the trend of, led by the likes of Patrick Mahomes and before him, the Breeze and Peyton offenses and Brady, Manning, Rodgers, blah, blah, blah. We'd seen points go up like this. And then again, I think for fantasy players out there, for those that were looking for big fireworks in week one, it was a little dip from some of the contests there. I think when you look at a matchup like the Jaguars and the Dolphins in a hot, sticky, humid Florida environment, we thought we might see points galore, but both teams keeping it relatively civil on the scoreboard. But good, it was so good to have football back, whether you were watching individual games, where you're tuning into a bit of red zone, of course, all through the ESPN mainframe wide system of apps, streaming platform, TV, everything that you could catch it. It was just good to have the blood pumping again with live action football, but also plenty of panic to go around. A few recent, I don't want to say confirmation of biases, but perhaps confirmation of presumptions we might have had about certain teams. I think there's some necessary panic, and then perhaps where we projected a little bit, maybe around a team like the Cincinnati Bengals with Joe Burrow back, Joe Shiesty, Slim Shiesty, whatever he's going by now. We thought we might see, they'll hit the hit the ground running, hit the road in the fast lane, but alas, not to be. We get to dive into in our little recovery session here, whether it's worth panicking about some teams, whether it's let's just ease up a little bit and just remember week one is often a little crazy.
Yeah, like it's one game down, 16 to go for these teams. Everybody's still mathematically alive, but you and I are going to dash the hopes of some of these teams and tell you, players or units, whatever it might be, the teams that we're out. I mean, we're done already. We're not going to stick around. Already start looking ahead to the draft. That 1 week of sample is enough. That it's going to be a long road ahead. So maybe find another team that you kind of give that positive moral praise to, just to keep the season interesting, or pick up another fantasy team if you're keen. But Laz, the crazy thing is scoring. It's certainly down, but it seems like we're have our popular demand segment. We had a good week one, by the way. But for context, from expectation, overs were actually 8-7 after the Chiefs Ravens game, but passing yards had the fewest in any week one in almost 2 decades. So it seems like overall expectation, with whether it's too high shell, or Troy Aikman was saying the lack of practices or lack of preseason reps for a lot of these teams, that it really has made these offenses slower to start. It seems as though the expectation is that's how it's here to stay. And now we got to decide and discern where it goes from here. But we are starting with the phone lines open and the hot take hotline brought to you by Macca's. Laz, you reached out to a couple, you just reached out to social media at large for some hot takes on the season. We're going to tell you if, hey, we like the takes hot, we like them spicy. We're going to tell you if they're a little too picante for our liking, or if you're in the sweet spot. And it is a hot take, but it's one we back. And we're going to start with one from Paul Hunt. Russell Wilson will not start for the Steelers. Might even be traded before the deadline. Laz, what is your take on that hot take?
I'm all for it. This is his last name's Hunt, and he's hunting big game with this take. It's a beautiful sizzler to get us off and running for the 2024 campaign, because look, this was a week one where we had some late scratchings, some controversial late scratchings. We're going to get in Christian McCaffrey just yet, but when we had Russell Wilson being ruled out after dealing with injury through the week and having murky status, and then long stats up Justin Fields. Now, you did some little research there, diving into next gen stats as you do, to have a look at Justin Fields's map there. And when you break that down, I'll see if we can pull that up. His passing chart for Justin Fields in week one, it wasn't an overly, a consistently rhythmic passing offense. It wasn't an overly, ecstatic offensive day for either teams in that contest between the Atlanta Falcons and the Pittsburgh Steelers. But there is certainly a sense here that when you have two quarterbacks, both cheap, I know that you believe youth plays a factor. I agree with you there, but just game-breaking speed and the ability to come up with answers when they're not normally there, which Justin Fields can do in real live game snaps. We don't know. It doesn't always look pretty in preseason. It doesn't always look pretty during practice sessions as well, when you want to see things on schedule. But if he's avoiding consistent mistakes, he's avoiding game-breaking mistakes, and he's allowing you to that get out of jail free card when the play breaks down or you're behind the chains, and he's able to create chunk yardage with his legs. We saw some moments there. We did see some flash passing moments there. We get the chemistry connection going with the George Pickens. I love this because I think Fields is the better option. I don't think they're glowing either way, but I love what Paul's throwing down here. Justin Fields to take this job, continually run with it, make it academic. Now, the other side of this, though, is, Phil, who's trading for Russell Wilson? Who's going right now? This is what we need. I don't think the Packers, with their 4 weeks potentially without Jordan Love, I don't think Russell Wilson is the type of presence. This is be really early for this to happen. Too early for this to happen. And I don't think that's necessarily the vibes you want to bring in to a young, energized, very trendy, in terms of fan love locker room that they have in Green Bay. Who could possibly be a suitor? If you agree and think that Justin Fields can take this job, run with it the rest of the way, and make Russell Wilson surplus to requirement.
Well, to your point, nobody today. I mean, Jordan Love's not even going on IR, which means the Packers are at least holding out hope that his return timeline is less than 4 weeks. They're going to keep that roster spot occupied by Love. But we've seen many a year. Last year with the Jets, unexpected injury to Aaron Rodgers. We saw it with the Vikings. Kirk Cousins a year ago, week 8, I think, is when he tore his Achilles last year. So it would need a situation in which a team is a playoff team and has a sudden need at quarterback whilst not having a suitable replacement. And because Russell Wilson, I think who he was in Denver is who he is now. And that is somebody who is a number 25 best starting option in the NFL. And I mean, just add to the list of memes and, bits of banter on shows like this, somebody who's inactive for the game, yet decides to put on pads and eye black when he can't play. It would have been akin to, I was in San Francisco last night. I was searching out Christian McCaffrey, and I was looking for dudes in sweatshirts because that's what you wear when you're not playing. You wear street clothes. And maybe those are street clothes for Russell Wilson. I don't know. But the one thing I will say about this take from Paul, and he's right in the lane of what we want for hot takes, is that Justin Fields didn't exactly grab the reins of the starting job in Pittsburgh and run away with it and make those in Steel City demand that he remain the starter. This is a team that their longest scoring drive was 46 yards. Chris Boswell accounted for all of their points, 6 for 6 on field goals, 5 of which were over 40 yards. That's the most 40-yard makes by any player since Chris Boswell 8 years ago. 4.1 yards per play. And you mentioned the passing chart that I sent you on Instagram. There it is. Middle third of the field. One of the easiest places to attack, one of the most susceptible places to attack, especially when you have running backs who can catch out of the backfield. Didn't even address it. Now, this is something that we don't know if it's Arthur Smith and the plays he's calling as the offensive coordinator, the former Falcons head coach, that he's calling a bunch of stuff to the flats, or if that's the only places to which Justin Fields is throwing it. But you're going to see teams, whether it's through press man or whatever it might be, really clamp down on those areas and make life difficult for Fields to complete passes there if he continues. Only 2 trips to the red zone. They both came up empty for Pittsburgh. So this starting opportunity for Fields, if he wants that job, if he wants this take to come true, he's going to have to look like somebody who is a first-round pick. Otherwise, Mike Tomlin's already made his preference known, and that might go against some people who, Mike Tannenbaum, another Mike T, who I respect, on our Blitz show, said, if the competition's close and you have a guy who's 7 or 8 years younger, you go with the younger guy because of upside. And here there's also athletic upside and escapability that Fields has over Wilson comfortably, especially in 2024. So it's lining up to where it will be true, but Fields and this offense have work left to do to get it there. Laz, we have another hot take from Kieran. Kieran says, Sam Darnold will be a Pro Bowler this year. The Lego fireman Sam and the Vikings went into MetLife playing the Giants in their 1925 throwbacks with an offensive scheme to match, and the Vikings win 28-6. Laz, your take, Darnold Pro Bowler, question mark?
I have long been a defender of Sam Darnold, even through the dark times, the dark age, with the different iterations, the places he's found himself, where the exciting opportunity with the 49ers when he got, extended playing time and threw a couple of darts and then also, turned the ball over as he's prone to do. But for Sam Darnold, it was a near perfect first half. He was carving up the Giants secondary there. And it wasn't just, you saw instant chemistry with like Justin Jefferson. Jordan Addison had a productive early part of that game before leaving with injury. But then we saw, touchdown passes to Naylor where he's looking off. He's using Justin Jefferson as an obvious decoy out of the backfield, holding defensive backs with his eyes. I want to repeat that one more time. This is Sam Darnold when we're talking about here. We're not talking about Peyton. We're not talking about Aaron Rodgers. We're not talking about Tom Brady, Drew Brees. We're not talking about Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, anyone. We're talking about Sam Darnold holding defensive backs with disciplined eyes. Yes, I'm seeing ghosts out there. So holding defensive backs with disciplined eyes, looking them off and creating an easy, what in the end looked like an easy chunk play throw to the end zone for a touchdown. Nearly perfect. So can Sam Darnold make the Pro Bowl? Absolutely. And here's why. Obviously, Addison not to miss too much time after getting a little banged up there. But Kevin O'Connell, known fantastic worker with quarterbacks. He gets the tag, the quarterback whisperer. That's his head coach there. Has proven track record of getting great play out of different quarterbacks in his system. So that's a massive boost. We also know with the Pro Bowl, Mr. Huntley, no shots fired. There's some alternates that can happen here. It doesn't necessarily, it's not just the cream of the crop from the AFC and the NFC. As it works its way out, we do see some replacements. But I think Sam Darnold, because this Vikings defense is not expected to overwhelm anyone, you're going to see a chance to put up high numbers, a chance to throw the ball around. Arm talent isn't the issue with Sam Darnold. It's never been the issue. The man can spin a football, but consistency is an issue. Decision-making has long been an issue. Forget my excitement over the first week. And additionally, this is something where this is week one and it is against the New York Giants, who I expect to be competing for the first overall pick in the 2025 NFL draft. So he absolutely can. I back it. If I would happily jump. I am happily jumping on that bandwagon. The Sam Darnold is going to make the Pro Bowl, but understand the context it's coming from. I am a flag bearer. I am a flag waver for the Sam Darnold Express. Always have been. We have nicknames for him known as the Peacock in fantasy leagues I'm in because of my devout devotion. I may have edited a video to that theme around Sam Darnold at some point. So there's bias here. But as far as a hot take is concerned, I love it. I'm on board. You have my full support, Sir Grillmaster, for throwing that one out there.
Yeah, Laz, I don't need to add too much about Darnold's performance. I mean, 13 of 14, you said it, almost perfect in the first half. 3 for 3, targeting Justin Jefferson with 50 yards on those 3, and I believe his touchdown was in the first half. But he was pressured 3 times. I think his performance says a lot more about the Giants, that despite how painful it was for the Panthers in their debut, going down by a tennis score, 30-0 to the Saints, I do think when the season's said and done, the Giants are going to have the worst record. I think their secondaries, the collection of corners and safeties, is the worst in the NFL. It's either them or Washington, and they play each other this week. So, stoppable force is going to meet movable object when the Giants have the ball. If we're having this conversation a week from now and Darnold is anywhere near the same level of serviceable that he was against the Giants in week 2 against the 49ers, and then they have the Texans, now we're talking. But right now, too spicy for my liking. Even though you're right, we can get to the 6th best NFC quarterback, and you say, okay, let's say 49ers make it back to the Super Bowl. I know it's a long season. I'm not picking them to, but if you have Brock Purdy, and Matt Stafford, and Dak Prescott, and Jordan Love, and we'll see what Jalen Hurts does. And I think I said Matt Stafford already. Who else? Who am I missing? Derek Carr, if he looks anywhere near what he did in week 1.
If we get that bad boy, Hoobastank loving, simple plan playing Derek Carr out there, who looked ready like he was ready to crotch chop the camera after throwing a long touchdown pass, the first touchdown pass of the season, sends a deep shot to Rashid Shaheed.
Yeah.
If we get that Derek Carr, who's talking smack to JC Horn, letting him know, I just put 3 touchdowns on you alone, something that isn't Disney appropriate. Yeah, Derek Carr's going to make a fun run at this one from the NFC as well.
Laz, I'll tell you, I said this on this show, our kind of punting special we had last week, that I was going to wait for Minnesota to beat the Giants and then take the season under on their win total. That's exactly what I did. $2.10 under 7.5 wins, because I'm not a believer in the Vikings. It's not that I'm not a believer in Sam Darnold per se. They have a lot of needs. They're going to be vying with the Bears for that third spot in the division. I still think this is a 7-10 team, and they had a great week one against probably the worst team in the NFL. So I'm out on Darnold as a Pro Bowler. Laz, we are also handing out end of season honors via Brad Bolt, whose hot take is Jaden Daniels will be Offensive Rookie of the Year.
Yeah, this one is where Brad, friend of the show. We love you, Brad. Always a keen participant in the comment section, sending phenomenal questions in. But this one is a little too hot for me. I don't think any of the quarterbacks from what we saw, and Bill Barnwell did a great breakdown. Please go check that out on ESPN.com about the struggles that really matched history with first-year rookie quarterbacks in week one, getting that first start, particularly facing pressure across the board, whether it was Jaden Daniels, whether it was whether it was Caleb Williams. And what we see is, a massive dip in production, essentially a lack of production facing pressure situations. Jaden Daniels, most of the biggest plays that we saw from him were with his legs. One of the picks that we had on that punting special last week was I had Jaden Daniels 6 or more rushing touchdowns for the season. He's 1/3, 33.33 repeater percent of the way there after stumbling in for a second one late in that game. We did see his legs at play, and they're absolutely going to be a factor. But I think through the aerial game, a lot of check downs, not a lot of explosive downfield shots like we might have seen with him last year with some of his LSU friends there. Those very talented LSU friends that he did have. So I think that from a quarterback standpoint, across the fold, when it came to those rookies, it wasn't an overwhelming week one. And I think that some of the receivers, my pick was Brian Thomas Jr., who got off to a great start. That's my offensive rookie of the year pick, got off to a great start down there. Keon Coleman was productive, not so much for Marvin Harrison Jr. and his fantasy owners, hand up there. But I think there's enough productivity from some of the other spots that, Jaden Daniels for me, the legs will certainly be there. I didn't see much from the passing game to make me buoyed by his chances at making that run. And just looking at the skill position talent that he's working with as well, it doesn't overwhelm and make you feel like this is going to be a highly ascendant offense or a team with a really good winning record, which we know can be very influential for these quarterback-heavy awards.
But not for Rookie of the Year. If you go back and look at guys who have won it, C.J. Stroud last year won a lot of games as a rookie and ran away with Rookie of the Year, but he also threw for 4,100 yards in 15 games. You look at the two quarterbacks who won it before that, Justin Herbert won 6 games. Kyler Murray, I think, won 5. But both of them threw for north of 4,000 yards.
Exactly.
Not for Murray, but he had 3,000 plus comfortably and a lot of rushing touchdowns. And for this to happen for Jaden Daniels, Cliff Kingsbury is going to have to trust him. I mean, Cliff Kingsbury has worked with some terrific quarterbacks. Another one in this rookie class, Caleb Williams at USC, also worked with Patrick Mahomes, worked with the aforementioned Kyler Murray, did Cliff Kingsbury. And for whatever reason, in a game that Washington was well behind because of their abysmal secondary and Baker Mayfield being more than keen to pick that apart, 289 and 4 touchdowns, it was still a lot of modest throws, close to the line of scrimmage, not really attacking the middle, not a lot of deep shots. And I know Washington, they have Terry McLaurin, and then we'll see who's number 2 if it ends up being Luke McCaffrey or Olamide Zaccheaus or whomever. But Jaden Daniels, he only had 3 of his 24 pass attempts go longer than 10 yards. His air yards per completion at LSU last season when he won the Heisman was 8.5. It was 2.9 in week one. So unless he really gets the keys and gets the opportunity to roll the dice and risk, reward, fail, he's not going to put up the numbers needed to win Offensive Rookie of the Year. So Brad, in his assessment that this guy's a dual threat, he can get 8-10 rushing touchdowns and take care of the ball. Those are all good things. But unless he's somebody who's really putting up big numbers, if you have Xavier Worthy in Kansas City who gets 11 touchdowns on the season, he's already got 2. And really, they've shown that they are comfortable using him in the passing game, blown coverage, sure, but in the running game as well. Not quite in a Deebo Samuel role, but it's like, let's get this guy in space, jet motion. He's somebody you can put up statistics for me that is worthy of consideration for Rookie of the Year. And we know Kansas City is going to score points. We don't necessarily know that Washington will. So that's
No,
where I have paused on
I
Jane Daniels' offensive
just
Rookie of the Year.
just what the model you put out there, for what those numbers that he'd need to get to and how he falls short. Honestly, for Jaden Daniels to have a run at a Rookie of the Year, you think about mobile quarterbacks that didn't blow you away with their gross total passing yardage, but efficiency and successful. You're actually looking at kind of like a Dak Prescott rookie season, 36 odd 100 yards, 29 total touchdowns. So combining, through the end on the ground and limiting the mistakes. He had 4 interceptions in that rookie year where him and Zeke burst onto the scene simultaneously. That would kind of be the model, but that was a team that was loaded with a great offensive line, wide receiver talent, tight end talent, some not the most total defense, but some very strong defensive playmakers there. That doesn't correlate with what we've seen in Washington.
Yeah, and with Washington as well, Jaden Daniels had the shortest average release time of any quarterback in week 1. So, part of that could be not trusting O-line, needing to get the ball out quickly. But again, if it's all going to be first read, real quick, long handoffs for 4 or 5 yards a pop, ultimately you're going to have an incompletion, and then the drive stalls out. And it's just going to be a lot of, 180 passing yard days, which isn't going to get it done, even if he stays healthy. Let's just keep it rolling. Kieran back with another hot take. Titans will be a top 3 defense this season.
I mean, this is week 1 written all over it, because we just talked about rookie quarterbacks starting in week 1 tend to have their struggles. Caleb Williams looked like he didn't know exactly when it was time to roll out of the pocket and cause some mayhem, as he was known to at USC, but wasn't productive doing it either. That did not lead to the big plays that we saw the flashes of in preseason, that we saw over and over again at USC. I think a Bears offensive line that was overwhelmed by I think the Titans will be strong in the trenches on both sides. I think offensive, we talked about in our week 0 preview punting special. We did talk about the strength, particularly on that center through left side of the offensive line for the Tennessee Titans. And then defensively, they've got some talent up front as well. And honestly, the Bears offensive line looked overmatched for a lot of that time. Caleb Williams you want to see him do the little things well, the simple things well, and credit to the Titans defensive line that they leapt off the field in terms of, or leapt off the tape and off the TV screen in terms of disrupting and causing no rhythm whatsoever to be established by that Bears offense. I think they'll be a good defense. I think they'll play tough, even though this is not the Vrabel Titans. I think they will certainly be a team that, because of that physicality, they won't be an easy out that people might look at them on name alone on the schedule. But let's compare to some of the other elite units out there. I think obviously we saw what the Dallas Cowboys did in Cleveland. We think of teams like the Kansas City Chiefs with a retooled secondary, but still with plenty of talent, and obviously Steve Spagnuolo at the helm to go through. Baltimore obviously didn't get off to the fastest start for their season, but we expect that to be a very good unit. Pittsburgh Steelers undoubtedly will be in this conversation. As we look, it's week 1. That Saints defense certainly didn't look old and tired in week 1, but they also don't get to play the Carolina Panthers. I think there's enough contenders with perhaps more complete units throughout to keep the Titans out of that top 3 tier, but they're going to be a tough out because of the way they play on that side of the ball, because of the contributors they have at all 3 levels.
Well, Naz, looking at their next 6 weeks, aside from what might end up being a Malik Willis revenge game when the Packers come to town, it's Jets, Dolphins, Bills, Lions, Colts. They're going to get a bigger test.
Yes.
I like this hot take more than you do because I think L'Jarius Sneed is locked down. I mean, we saw him last year, 90 times targeted, no touchdowns allowed. We haven't seen that many targets for a corner without a touchdown allowed since Stephon Gilmore the year he won Defensive Player of the Year. The way Sweat and Simmons and Joseph Day combined on the D-line, again, it's the Bears. It's the first career start for Caleb Williams, but still Williams with the fewest average yards per attempt of any first-round quarterback making a week 1 start since the early 1970s. They shut down the Bears, and really hard done and kind of, self-inflicted wound from Will Levis, one of the worst interceptions we'll see all year, ultimately did them in. They blew a 17-point lead and didn't allow an offensive touchdown. So if I'm that defense, I'm furious and knowing, all right, we have to play at this level. We're the Steelers of Nashville. We got to play at this level every week. And the same pass chart laws that we looked at, it can tell a lot of stories. We saw the connection yesterday. So the Jets go to Nashville next. We saw the connection yesterday between Aaron Rodgers and Garrett Wilson. No matter who was the quarterback last year for the Jets, there was some kind of connection with Garrett Wilson just because of his talent, but it's still developing elsewhere. I mean, even the touchdown Rodgers threw to Lazard, it was a free play. So there was no risk. He threw it up, and as Rodgers does, it was a great throw, but there was no risk. It was just, we'll go. Go look at Aaron Rodgers' pass chart. He had 21 attempts, I want to say. 17 were shorter than 15 yards and left of the left hash mark. They were all in this one quadrant of the field. 17 of the 21, he had a little screen to Breece Hall. He had Garrett Wilson going over the middle. He had the free play to Lazard, which was the touchdown. But other than that, it was very much confined to one area. When L'Jarius Sneed goes and he goes, all right, 5, you and I are going to get well acquainted over 50 snaps today. I don't know where else the Jets are going to turn offensively. That they definitely lacked rhythm on the majority of their possessions last night in San Francisco. And we know with the Titans offense, they're just lack of rhythm. I mean, that to me, 1st to 10 wins. But I think a lot more people are going to be saying this type of stuff about the Titans next week. I do think they're going to frustrate the Jets. And then if Jordan Love's not back, then the real test comes the following week where it's, Dolphins, Bills, Lions, Colts in quick succession. But if this take was top 5, I'd be bought in. But at top 3, there are too many elite defenses. The Titans, though, took a massive step forward defensively in the offseason. Jared Goff is going to win MVP is the next hot take on the Hot Take Hotline, brought to you by Macca's. Bryce Parker. Laz, what do you think about Jared Goff's MVP candidacy?
I mean, what he does have valuably from week 1 that not a lot of other MVP candidates will get to boast, Patrick Mahomes certainly will, is a victory over another elite quarterback. Matthew Stafford got plenty of love and respect over this offseason. Top 10 lists, both across ESPN and across the entirety of NFL literati, had Matthew Stafford firmly placed in there, and for Jared Goff to go toe-to-toe and come away in a tough contest with a victory. It's a nice resume builder. I think what excited me, even though it wasn't a big day for Sam Laporta, wasn't a massive day for Amon-Ra St. Brown, for Jared Goff to make a run, we know that a second wide receiver target needed to merge behind Amon-Ra St. Brown. And obviously we mentioned Laporta at tight end, we know is there. And Jamison Williams certainly showed that game-breaking big playability in this contest. So that makes me feel that was one of the biggest question marks and holes on a probably the most complete roster across the NFL with what the Detroit Lions have put together. Wide receiver 2, who was going to step up there, was Jammo, the man known as Jammo. Jamison Williams going to step up beyond just the expectation and the kind of aura that surrounds his talent as with what he did at the University of Alabama. Week 1 suggests that, yes, we are actually seeing that come to fruition. If that is the case, Jared Goff has a massive chance to lead the most productive offense in the NFL. It's the fastest way to put yourself on track to an MVP. Do I think he ultimately wins it? No, I don't. I don't think that he is that caliber of consistent playmaker week in, week out, compared to some of the others. And considering some of the statements we saw, I think there was a lot of numbers behind the numbers of what we saw from Patrick Mahomes. I think he looked superb for most of that game, other than the one errant throw there. I thought there's so much more to come from that Kansas City Chiefs offense. They looked so in control throughout the contest. But then, I mean, how you can come away from week 1 and think Josh Allen in full flight Wyoming mode is not going to make a monstrous run in MVP is beyond me, because yes, we know that Diggs isn't there, and they're working in the likes of Keon Coleman. Dalton Kincaid didn't have a big game. James Cook looked really good on the ground. But Josh Allen, 2 touchdowns through the air, 2 touchdowns on the ground, running, bumbling, running over people, any type of verbiage that Chris Berman would throw out in his Hall of Fame career. That to me is there you go. That to me is the type of performance that says MVP run. I think Goff will be in the kind of top 5 conversation. I think the framework around him is superb, but no, I think it's a little hot right off the top there. And I've got my eyes on a few other directions for MVP from week 1.
Well, Laz, it was a young Rams defense against whom the Lions were going, and one that, Mike Clay, if you look at his positional rankings and unit rankings and such, he says they're going to be second worst in the NFL are the Rams. ahead of only the Cardinals. And Goff put up 217. Listen, nobody's criticizing Jared Goff's performance, but I think the way this identity of this team is when the going gets tough, they're going to do what they did in overtime, which is run the ball straight at you behind that road grader of an offensive line that they continue to invest in. David Montgomery had 45 rush yards on that overtime game-clinching, game-winning possession. Lions ran it 7 of 8 plays. The Jameson Williams piece is significant. Matched his career high in catches, set new career highs in times targeted and yards after the catch. That ultimately will open things up for Amon-Ra St. Brown. I think the Lions are every bit the NFC contender. But to a point you made last week, the MVP contender from that game, I think, is on the Rams. Matt Stafford, seeing how he performed after Puka Nacua was hurt, and everybody in the world knew, hey, they're targeting 10. Find 10. Cooper Kupp is getting every look. 21 targets for Cooper Kupp in one game. And again, I keep going back to these pass charts. There was no pattern to what Matthew Stafford was doing. The Lions were at 6s and 7s. Kirby Joseph had that huge interception in the end zone at the end of the first half. But other than that, it was Stafford at will, reading the defense. All right, you in man or zone. We're going to pre-snap. We're going to get to the line quick. We're going to do some pre-snap motion. I'm going to read your mail so I know exactly what you're set up. And then I'm just going to throw it to 10 in such a way that we're going to move the ball in a road environment, down multiple scores, down 14 points, almost coming back and getting the win.
The beat-up offensive line.
That's my concern, is that they lost their entire offensive line in 1 week. So how long can that go, especially when you have to play San Francisco twice and some other NFC contenders? You know, if those are all long-term injuries and the Rams are a 9-8 team, Matt Stafford isn't an MVP, but he's at 33-1 today. Looking at what he did and what his arm is doing, and you know, when Nacua comes back and Kyren Williams in the backfield, if this Rams team is a wild card team yet again, and Matt Stafford's thrown for 5,000 yards, which isn't crazy, he's the MVP. All due respect to Jared Goff, it's just I don't think Goff's going to put up the numbers, and I think it's going to be a type of season for the Lions where it's going to be, all right, we're going to run the ball a lot and wear you down physically and psychologically and do all the things. Not to say Jared Goff, we might not see him with blue and silver confetti raining on him in New Orleans. They have that kind of ceiling. I just don't think MVP's in the card because of how that team plays schematically. Laz, we have one more on the hot take hotline, and I'll be quick with my take. Mike Zimmer and his defense could save Mike McCarthy's job from Adam. Adam, I wore the shirt for a reason. I was very impressed with the boys in the dog pound on the weekend. I do think Mike Zimmer and the defense could save Mike McCarthy's job. I'm totally on board with it, but we won't know until January. The reason Mike McCarthy's job is in question is because of what happened last year in the playoffs after all they did in the regular season. Yet again, playoff disappointment against the Packers. And yeah, Dak threw a bad pick in the first half to Jair Alexander. There was some contact on it, I admit, but it was still a pick nonetheless. Threw a pick six. But over the course of the game, the Dan Quinn-led defense for the Cowboys allowed 4 touchdown drives of 75 yards or longer. It was routes on air for the Packers. And that's why the Cowboys lost that game. So it sucks for Dallas and Dak because he just signed this massive deal and the pressure's going to be on and all this. He can't prove anybody right until January. Dallas could go 13-4, get the NFC 1 seed. And it's like, all right, well, what's gonna happen when they get to the playoffs? That franchise, that expectation they have, that is how they're going to be defined this season. So yeah, if they go in the wild card again, let's say they're say Philly wins the division and Dallas gets Detroit, like a tough draw, and they lose 37-20. Mike McCarthy's probably on the chopping block. But if Dallas wins a playoff game, they get to an NFC championship game, and they lose a close one in San Francisco, I think that's much more forgivable. But they're going to need a top-tier defense to do that because of how quiet things were in the offseason. Through one game, Mike Zimmer looked like, yeah, he's got this defense humming. But again, Laz, that could also just be because they're playing against Deshaun Watson and one of the more disappointing week 1 teams, or units rather, in that Browns offense.
Yeah, we'll get to Deshaun Watson and that Browns offense in not too long, I'm sure. Look, for this take, yeah, he absolutely could. But what you said, there's the way I view it, there is so much pressure on the Cowboys to achieve and to get over a proverbial hump. But the regular season feels like it doesn't carry that much pressure. And my view is it doesn't matter, like you said, if they go 13-4 or 14-3 and get the 1 seed, or if they go 9-8 or 9-7-1 with a horrific overtime tie and get a wild card spot. Nothing matters until the playoffs. We've seen them tick the regular season box before. Nothing matters until they, at minimum, make an NFC championship game. I think if they get knocked out in the wild card or division round, if they make the playoffs, I think Mike McCarthy's gone. This is the final year of his contract. I'll tie a hot take to this one that we had a write-in from Instagram. We love that from Jason in Melbourne, who says Dallas Cowboys have found another future Pro Bowl corner in Kalen Carson. I actually do agree with that. I think Carson has been phenomenal early on. It might not be this year, but I think he's got Pro Bowls ahead of him. Physical, long, has speed, or physical with a great frame. Can track downfield, has shown him better ball skills.
And value from the 5th round as well.
Oh, the word is they had him on the board in the 3rd round, and he was just a blinking tag when he was still there in the 5th, and particularly with Deron Bland out. But yeah, Carson's a great find, and I don't think that's the only one they've uncovered, because DeMarvion Overshone is a name you need to know. He rocks number 13. It's not Michael Gallup out there playing defense anymore. This man, anyone that is faster to track down a quarterback, a mobile quarterback in Deshaun Watson as well, than Micah Parsons deserves your attention. Eric Kendricks and Overshone look like they have completely rejuvenated that Cowboys linebacker core that was filled mainly with safeties in 2023. But all this being put to the side, nothing, to quote the Macho Man Randy Savage, the late Macho Man Randy Savage, nothing means nothing. None of it matters until the playoffs for the Dallas Cowboys. Just get to the dance and let us know when you're there, and we'll pay attention to what music you're playing.
Well, that'll do it for this edition of the Hot Take Hotline. Certainly not the last this season, but week 1 Hot Take Hotline. It's robust, and it's pretty decisive for one game of 17. Laz, let's go to, well, I guess our version of the same thing, Draft of Despair. People for whom it's like, it's one sample size, it's one game, don't worry about it. No, we're telling you to worry about it. We're telling you we are out on these units. We've seen 60 minutes of football, whether it's by reputation or whatever it may be. We're done. I got to be out of here in about 20 minutes. So let's do 2 of these apiece, and I'll just concede the first pick to you.
You don't want to scissors, paper, rock? You don't want to scissors, paper, rock? I'm ready. No? Okay. I'll take the first.
I can't see you with my show notes. So
okay. Well, your notes are more important than my face. But let's go with pick 101. Just mentioned them before. Deshaun Watson. Like, more off-field allegations, more off-field sexual allegations coming to light. We'll put that in that category for now, because that is a legal process. That is a process that needs to be dealt with care, and not in just a Wednesday morning draft exercise between 2 great friends separated by 16,000 kilometers. On field, the quarterback, Deshaun Watson. I've been out on him for a while. I think who he is as a quarterback has fundamentally changed over the past many years. Who he is as a processor, how he sees the field, accuracy, mechanics, all that. I couldn't be more out. I don't believe this man is a top 32 quarterback in the NFL. I'm not sure he's a top 64 quarterback in the NFL, to be quite frank. I'm not sure he has a backup job if he doesn't have that current contract. And there, as much as it was disturbing to me to see, a fan base as storied as a Brown fan base, not all of them, but huge chunks of them get on board with something like Deshaun Watson signing. This is, it looks like a karmic and a massive karmic wave with the production that he offers. I haven't been, yes, you guys know that for anyone that's watched the show for some time, as our border has exited there, that's how bad Deshaun Watson was. That the border just left the show.
He's like Beetlejuice. If you say his name too many times, all hell breaks loose.
Our framework didn't even want to be around for Deshaun Watson discussion. Thankfully, it's returned to us now. But Deshaun Watson, you guys know who've watched the show, you know that my heart beats for that silly team from North Texas. I haven't been so unbothered by an opposition quarterback threatening the defense since maybe late career Eli Manning, like end of the road Eli Manning. Like, it was just like unbothered, was not phased or fussed at all that they were ever going to threaten the Cowboys defense. So Deshaun Watson is my 101 pick here. I've seen enough. I think you release him, honestly. I'd rather see Jameis Winston out there. Like, have no interest in watching Deshaun
80
Watson let up.
million in dead cap, Laws.
You know what? That's the karmic price. And
80 million.
There are scribes out there. There are great voices out there, the likes of Mark Sesslers of the world that have gone back and forth with teams like the Browns and bled their fandom for that team, that are just saying, rip it off and make this an aspirational position. Quarterback of the Cleveland Browns, make it something to behold once again, and not the walking, talking embarrassment that it currently is now. Cut him.
It hasn't been
Let
a
it
position to
go.
behold since Bernie Kosar, in the mid 1980s. But to support your point, it's one thing, behind a great offensive line, Watson was pressured a lot. It says a lot about Dallas's pass rush, and everybody knows Michael Parsons is going to create pressure, but they created. I think they had 3 different guys with 5 or more pressures in this game.
Marcus Lawrence, ageless, aging like a beautiful Shiraz from my home state,
like a Bordeaux from Europe. 13 off-target passes for Watson in this game. That accounted for 30% of his throws. Fewest air yards per completion in his career. When he was targeting wide receivers, remember they traded for Jerry Jeudy from the Broncos, trying to just give them like a wide receiver 3 a good look. 9 for 26 targeting wide receivers for 53 yards. Barely 2 yards an attempt when targeting your wide receivers, and 2 interceptions.
Sorry, Phil, what was that number? 9 for
26.
9 for 26 for how many total yards?
53.
So it's actually 10 for 27 for 95 yards, including the deep completion 7 yards over the sideline that CeeDee Lamb brought in.
Hey, it was a tactful throwaway. 88, helping CeeDee's fantasy points. So yeah, I'm out on Watson. Laz, my pick 102. I was hoping a fresh start and change of scenery would change things for Bryce Young. I don't know that that's the case. I think it's just his build has proven not conducive to the NFL. And this was so far off from an encouraging performance. I know it's game 1 of season 2, but with all they brought in, spent a lot of money in the offseason. He still can't handle the blitz. It's just like paralyzed in the pocket when the blitz comes in. And he was pressured on 13 of 38 dropbacks. I know that's less than ideal, but on those 13 pressures, twice he evaded, scrambled, but he ended up going 4 for 7 for 47 yards. That's actually not bad against pressure, 6 yards an attempt, except he was also sacked 4 times. So when pressured, has as many sacks as completions, and it almost netted out. In his last 6 road games, no touchdowns, 4 picks. This is a team that led for 0 seconds of the fourth quarter last season. Remember, their 2 wins, 1 came in overtime and 1 came at the siren. So that's 2-15 and kind of fortuitous 2-15. I mean, they were worse than some 0-17. Well, I guess we've only had 2, but they were worse than the 0-17 Lions that we saw not too long ago. And last year, when blitzed, his completion percentage was comfortably the worst in the NFL at 46.4%. So Dave Canales has work ahead. I think Carolina, this is not the solution at quarterback for them long term. Brad, I'm sorry, saying anyone knowing Carolina is playing the Saints, they didn't show up in week 1. And I think it's going to be a long year again. And I think if Carolina's in a position where they're picking top 5, they really should consider the nice thing is it sucks to miss on a quarterback, but you're not hamstrung cost-wise if they say, all right, well, Bryce Young's going to be our QB2. We're going to hand the keys to Carson Beck or Shedeur Sanders or Quinn Ewers or any of these quarterbacks who might go in the top 10. And there's not a lot of cost. You don't pick up the 5th-year option on the guy, ends up being a free agent after 4 years. You wasted 2 years, but look what happened to the Broncos. How many years have they wasted on this Russell Wilson endeavor? We're now 3, soon to be 4 years in before they can really start to right the ship. So that's my round 1, pick 2. Laz, I'll quickly go to my round 2, pick 1.
Little snake.
Yeah, we'll do snake.
Yeah.
And my final pick is going to be, I am out on the Washington Commanders secondary. This isn't a criticism of Baker Mayfield at all. Don't get me wrong. It wouldn't surprise me if the Bucs, again, by hook or by crook, on that pirate ship, find a way to make the playoffs again. This is independent of Baker's wide receiver party. 15 of 18, 4 touchdowns, 195 yards from targeting his wide receivers. An old faithful, Herm said it like an old watch. Always on time. Mike Evans is going to find a way, 1,000 yards and 8 touchdowns. God bless him. Laz, I'll tell you this. We were talking MVP stats earlier. I'm going to give you some quarterback numbers, and you just tell me where they would fit in an MVP conversation. Okay. 4,450 yards, 39 touchdowns in a season, 13-4 record. Right? Those are MVP caliber numbers.
Correct.
Those were the opposing quarterbacks over the course of last season against the Commanders. And you might say, well, yeah, they played Dak Prescott twice. They played Jalen Hurts twice. They played Jalen Hurts before the Eagles stunk. You are correct. Here's who else they played: Josh Dobbs, Russell Wilson, Justin Fields, Desmond Ridder, Daniel Jones twice, Trevor Siemian, and Mac Jones. And that murderer's row of quarterbacks put up 39 touchdowns, almost 4,500 yards, and went 13-4. If you have a fantasy quarterback on your bench and you're going against the Commanders, start him. Daniel Jones. I'm not going to dunk on Daniel Jones, be the next guy. You know, I know he looks like the default creative player in Madden. I don't fault. Everybody's dunking on him. He was terrible against the Vikings. I think he throws for 230 against Washington this weekend. And again, I also think that Jaden Daniels is going to have a terrific day because the Giants couldn't stop. So I don't have an appropriate analogy at the tip of my tongue. They couldn't stop anybody.
Phil, is that the first time someone said 230 yards passing with an exclamation mark, like it meant something?
I don't know what the market is. I haven't looked, but I got to imagine it's like 170. I mean, nobody thinks Daniel Jones is going to do much of anything.
No, but it's a beautiful sentiment you shared there. That's the level of expectation we're at.
But no, I'm so out on the Commanders' defense. And that, I guess, is one hope for Offensive Rookie of the Year for Jaden Daniels, because he's going to be throwing a lot in the fourth quarter. This unit, I mean, they whiffed on Forbes. It's unfortunate because they've tried to invest draft capital there, but man, it's part schematic, part personnel. Their corners are just at a loss no matter who goes up against them. So when you have a serviceable, confident quarterback like Baker Mayfield, he's going to put up 300 or 289, 4 touchdowns, no picks. And when you have somebody who's fighting for his job like a Daniel Jones, 2/3 of that, which for him is a good day.
Hands up accountability. I also seem to have whiffed on Emmanuel Forbes there, but yes, I agree with the sentiment there. I just don't think it's not a unit that can hold up long enough, especially with the depletion of the talent up front, to really shut down any windows against capable quarterbacks or Daniel Jones. Mine here this is just confirmation of week one expectations I had coming into week one. And I'm sorry to colleague of ours and dear friend of both of ours, Mr. Sam Bruce, but I am out on the Raiders. I don't need to see anything more. I know they added Christian Wilkins to go with Max Crosby. And there's people that will point to how they finished in, metrics like DVOA last season, the defensive ranking. But if you watch that defense, I think there's some emptiness in some of those final season results. I'm not going to hammer on about their quarterbacks because we know they're lacking at that spot with Gardner Minshew and then Aiden O'Connell behind him. But you come up against a LA Chargers team in the first game of the Jim Harbaugh era. There were no secrets about what the game plan was going to be for the Chargers. They were not going to spin this thing downfield for fun like Mike Martz is calling plays. This was going to be, we're running it straight at you. Take Michigan, send it to the West Coast, and let's get it going. The supposed strength, the defensive line of that Raiders team, saw J.K. Dobbins off 17 straight seasons of season-ending injuries go for 10 for 135, looking like LaDainian Tomlinson in Chargers colors. Like, this is what we thought they were. They are who we thought they were.
I saw a little muscle hamster Doug Martin, but that was just me.
No, from a strides standpoint, I actually agree, but I'm just going with colors. I'm just going with jerseys here. But honestly, 13.5 yards a carry for a guy that people didn't know if he could still run. Now, in saying that, if you did catch one half of 50% of this show had a little fantasy tips video that went out before the season, said players that you must leave the mid to late rounds of your drafts with. J.K. Dobbins was the cover of that. So hopefully you followed me there. I know people in my league may have, because they pinched him before I could even get him in my fantasy leagues. But regardless, this Raiders team looks exactly like you expect. There was no, shining breakthrough productivity from the likes of Brock Bowers, Devontae Adams, Jacoby Myers looks decent on paper. They all go for about 60 yards and that's it. Like the ground game with Zamir White or Alexander Madison, whichever way you go, do you like 3.4 yards a carry, Phil? Do you like 3.8 yards a carry? This whole team is not set up for success this season. I'm sorry. I don't mean Antonio Pierce has been a great story. I don't mean to just, turn out the lights completely on the effort they're putting in there. But as far as I'm concerned, with my second round pick, with the final pick of our 2-round, who have we seen enough of? The draft of despair. I'm handing in the Raiders as in totality. Watch them if your fantasy players are starting against them or your team that you barrack for is playing them. But otherwise, for neutral viewing, seen enough.
I get twice a year the inner beauty we'll find between Broncos and the Raiders. And Laz, if you're a Raiders supporter, I know why Antonio Pierce won the job with how much he galvanized the team and putting up 63 points on the Chargers, ultimately costing Brendan Staley his job in that game, highest franchise record, highest ever in that rivalry. But remember, Jim Harbaugh was interested in that Raiders job had it been available. He started his head coach or his pro coaching career as a quarterbacks coach with the Raiders franchise in the 90s. And so it was, one of the teams he was looking at was to go to the Raiders. Instead, he goes to a divisional rival. And now Vegas has to deal with, that monster twice a year. And we do think that ultimately they will get up to speed. Chargers might be limited this season, but count your days because they will be in wild card contention probably no later than next season is the presumption. All right, Laz, talking about upward trajectories, talking about, just general happiness and fruitfulness. It's time for Popular Demand, brought to you by Tab. And again, I don't write the mail, I just read it. Last week, this here humble little NFL Brekkie Show went 4-0 in its tips between Ravens, Chiefs, and Eagles and Packers in Sao Paulo, Brazil. I've already erased my brain of week one. Yours truly went up $1.80 or 1.8 units by tipping Jalen Hurts to throw an interception and for Lamar Jackson not to. That went up 1.8 units. Laz, you went with a little bit longer shots and hit them both. Xavier Worthy, anytime touchdown, hit not once, but twice. You only get paid once for that, unfortunately, because it was a hell of a tip. And also Jordan Love over, I believe it was 40 yards for $2 even, correct me if I'm wrong, for his longest completion, which he hit. He almost did it twice. So Laz, we are cooking with gas. We are on fire, and we look to keep it going for a game that starts week 2 with a lot of AFC East intrigue. Someone's going to move to sole possession of first in the division. Someone is going to join the Jets in the loss column between Dolphins and Bills in South Florida. I've been talking a lot. I'll let you take your talents to South Beach first. What's your first tip?
This is a formula with a Josh Allen and a Buffalo Bills contest that has played out before. Up against good pass rushers, disruptive pass rushers, Josh Allen is known to scramble. He's known to create second phase plays with his legs and pick up chunk yardage as a rusher. I have Josh Allen over 35 yards of rushing, or 35 yards, I should say, 35 yards or more of total rushing at $1.75. I was really impressed with the Miami Dolphins pass rush in the practice I got to see on our training camp tour. Calais Campbell was someone that jumped out right off the bat, even at 38 years of age, I believe he is now. Mm-hmm. And we saw that right off, a sack on the first play for the Miami Dolphins this season. Incredibly disruptive. Not just himself, but you're seeing Jalen Phillips back healthy. You're seeing Chop Robinson create pressure. There's plenty of contributors to that Miami Dolphins defense. So I believe they will be able to give the Buffalo Bills offensive line some tough stretches there. They'll be able to give them some trouble. They'll be able to, importantly, move Josh Allen off his spot. And when he does that, as we've seen, like this is going to be a season where we're getting wild cowboy Josh Allen out there. I think he'll tuck it, run, and I think 35 yards or more happily comes in prime time Thursday night. Friday, Australian time.
I said, gosh, on one of our shows that not all heroes wear capes. One wears number 17 in Buffalo, and that it's got to be hero ball for them. They lost 4 of their top 5 wide receivers in terms of receiving yards from a year ago. Khalil Shakir was the only holdover. Tab has about 100 markets right now on this game. We do expect a couple more to generate between now and kickoff. If they do end up with a carries market for Josh Allen, I'd be interested in that. The number 35, not going against you with, and looks like there's a little juice on the over at $1.75. So it does seem like that's where the money is pulling it up. It's a little high for my liking, but I do think he will get 9 or 10 carries, very similar rush yards and carries that he had against Arizona in week 1, 9 for 39. But I do think the market for carries will probably be 6 or 7 or 8, and I would take the over on that as well. I'm not as bullish on the yardage, though. I do think ultimately, if you force me to choose, I would back you on that. My best bet, one of them, I'm going with the quarterback on the other side, Tua Tagovailoa, longest completion, over 40 yards at $1.90. That's actually an alternate market. The over-under is set at 41.5 at $2.10. Oh, as my screen goes out. Over-under is 41.5 at $2.10. And I do think that'll hit. But for me, it's just the math made sense to buy that down to $40 even at $1.90. He had two completions last week in the second half against the Jags, go over that number. And then Devon Achane had a 39-yard catch. Didn't hit this number in either game against the Bills last season, but this Miami offense early in the season, I think they got the wrinkles out first to second quarter. It was an emotionally charged early stage, just an overall tense opening couple quarters in week 1 in Miami. They really started to stretch their legs in week 2. And Buffalo, I talked about what they lost at wide receiver. They also lost pieces at safety, which is just hellish when you're trying to stop Tyreek Hill and Jaden Waddle and Devon Achane, and any one of those guys can hit this number. So give me one catch for a Dolphin over 40 yards at $1.90.
I think when I look at this game, you mentioned, the big playability of some of that talent. When we look at how these teams came out of the blocks in week 1, Buffalo, it was certainly a slow build. They really took off in that second half, stacking up touchdowns, stacking up points in the second half. For the Miami Dolphins, they also fell down early against the Jacksonville Jaguars and clawed their way back in. So I'm looking at the second half total. It's at 24.5 points. It was at $2. It's just moved to $1.95 on the over. So I'm going to take over there. I think both these teams, with the talent they have, with the, I think with the chemistry that is still forging with the Buffalo Bills, we're going to see things matriculate and pick up throughout a game. It wasn't a surprise to see them pick up steam offensively in the second half of that game. And I think with the Miami Dolphins, the ability, this is a team that you have to stay so disciplined because of that speed. As a defense for the Bills, they have to stay so assignment sound, their angles, their lanes, how they contain the likes of Tyreek Hill. We saw him pick up his monstrously long touchdown in week 1. It's a route to the corner, but because of the angles taken by the Jags defense, he was able to pinwheel turn on the sideline, scamper down and turn it into what should have just been, your average massive chunk play. He turns it into an almost length of the field touchdown. You have to be so disciplined with that. I think that's something that the Bills team, they have been a well-coached, disciplined defense for season upon season. That's something you certainly bring into the game as it kicks off. But that is a type of focus that can wane as a contest goes on, that can get beaten down, that can start to pull thin, particularly down and down out. As you mentioned, Achane and Mostert, we'll see about the health there. It could be Jalen right out there and Waddle and Hill. We know, might guess, we could see either one of those names emerge and create this chunk play. So I think that task will wear on the Bills. I think the big play certainly, I think they're more likely to open up in the second half. Combine that with the way the Bills offense has erupted in the second half in week 1. And I like the over in the second half of the game there at 24.5.
See, Laz, we're agreeing with kind of game flow and game script. I'm going as my second play in popular demand, brought to you by Tab. I'm going first half under 24.5 at $1.85. And it's because of this Miami secondary, which as a group, corners and safety, you can make a cogent argument it's the best in the NFL.
Fantastic.
Probably 2 or 3 other teams can stake that claim. Wide receivers did have success against Miami last week. Brian Thomas, there was that great all-22 shot of how much ground he covered on a perfectly placed ball by Trevor Lawrence. But I think those are the kind of things that Miami will investigate over this short game week. And frankly, the receiving core of Brian Thomas and Gabe Davis and Christian Kirk is objectively superior to what the Bills have, at least at wide receiver, with Khalil Shakir, Keon Coleman. Will throw Dalton Kincaid in there. And I do think the Bills are going to try as much as they can to kind of keep everything in front of them. Again, I've already tipped that I think Miami will get one big play, but the Bills will do their best to limit those. So this is going to be a game of long sustained drives early and then break open late. So I do like the under 24.5 total points in the first half at $1.85. And quick maths by me, I think that 4-leg multi plays somewhere in the neighborhood of $11. Not advising that necessarily, but our tips, again, collectively, we are up 4.55 units through 1 week. It's good tipping. And by the way, if you want to catch this game, you can see it live. Bills at Dolphins Friday morning at 10:15 a.m. on ESPN.
What are you really gambling with? For free and confidential support, call the number on the screen or visit the website.
Well, that'll do it for this here NFL Brekkie Show, Week 2. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for submitting your hot takes to the hotline. Brought to you by Macca's. Thank you for bearing with our draft of despair and following along as you always have. We'll be back same time, same place next Wednesday, 9 a.m. Laz and I will see you then.